Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. Today I wanted to talk to you about a narcissist construct that starts in childhood that leads them to narcissism as well. So let's jump in. When the narcissist is born or the empath is born right beside each other, some people will even say, I don't know where this information comes from, but some people will tell you when a child is born that the head narcissist knows right off the bat already whether that child is going to be a narcissist or not. And I don't know how true that is or where that comes from, but I could see there being some kind of resemblance to that because you're talking about a heavy spiritual situation here. As much as the world wants to hide the fact that this is a spiritual situation, nevertheless, that's exactly what it is. And for the world to go out of their way to hide it, it kind of tells you something. It tells you that there's more going on than meets the eye. And if it's this heavy, that means like, so let's say, I'm jumping off into something new here. Okay, so let's just say like you have, out of every 10 families, you have one narcissist's mini cult. That's what I call them. Because that's what the narcissist household is run like. It's a small cult, a family cult. But if you have 1 out of 10 families is a mini cult narcissist family cult, then you're talking about, let's say 10% of all the families out there in the whole world are being run like these toxified narcissistic families. And if this is where the enemy's street soldiers come from, literally, and we're not just talking about one narcissist comes from them, you know, because you didn't become the narcissist if you're the empath or whatever, or the scapegoat or the more regular person. But what happens is you're the only one, typically, or there may be 2 of you. And we tend to drift and navigate away from that. We just don't like it. We don't like lying. We don't like the cheating. We don't like a lot of the ego that we see on a day-to-day basis. We like real. We always like genuine, innately. But trauma can change you. But I don't think it changes. See, I am a firm believer that we are innate spirits and we're not going to change. It may look like that. And we do change and we get salvation changes you, yes. But what I'm getting at is your innate spirit was always going to head in the direction that it comes into in its fruition, regardless. This is my opinion, because God knew us before the foundations of the world, right? So if he knew us before the foundations of the world, before we knew our mother or father and everything else, if God knew us and he's outside of time, then everything has been done to God. Now, us, we don't know what's going to happen, but he does. What I'm saying is like, we're the stone in motion. It's kind of like if you throw a stone, it's in motion. And that's how it is for us. We're always like moving in a direction and we don't know what fruition looks like. Yet, but God threw the stone and caught it. And it's all over already. In fact, I actually call what we live in today the past, because technically it's God's past. And when you look at the biblical narrative, if there is a future to what we're living in, and it's already been written and encoded in theology, and it's over, it's kind of like we are in the bookends of a book that's already been written, closed, and put on the shelf. I mean, to us, it's our present, but to God, this is already over. It's his past. I mean, he's outside of time, but I'm just saying, it's an interesting concept. But when you grow up in these families of narcissists, they grow up in an innate self as well, and it's different from ours. Their innate self, let's say we're all born with the same tools, but we have innateness, and that's what separates us. What separates us is our God-given innateness. So, in some kind of way, we came from him, right? You know, his breath is something. You know, we came from, or he created Adam. When he spoke and created Adam and Eve, right, and all that he already spoke and created all of us, all of our innate spirits. And then you may get down the road of, well, what's fair and what's not? Like, how could it be fair if we're us and then we have another narcissist, you know, another child besides that becomes a narcissist and you're the black sheep? And how is it fair if we were both birthed from God? You know, maybe through Adam, but through the moment in time when he created Adam and knowing that we're going to go all the way down the line or whatever and come from some sort of genealogy, whatever. Let's say we all come from God, his creation, which means we were somehow created from him, but it came from him. He spoke and here we are, whatever. But God, being a fair God, gives us all a chance. He gives us all the same opportunity. This is my opinion. If he gives us all the same opportunity, then what went wrong? Is it just environmental influences? Because a lot of people say, well, it doesn't seem that way in a lot of cases. It seems like some of these guys were born this way, or they were corrupted before they were 2. How is that fair? Well, there's different things going on. I don't think at all that I really don't think, I used to, but I don't think at all now that environment has anything to do with who we are. Any of this environment. But I don't think it is. And I know the word. And so it technically is an interesting topic because it doesn't go against the word. That's for sure. But there are some intricacies to it that people could maybe gather inklings of that. And I guess, and I say that because I'm talking like, you want to raise a child right, and then they won't depart from you or something like that, right? Those kind of scriptures. And I'm not trying to make light of them. I'm saying that is the right way to be. I don't think that it changes us as much as we were always going to do what we did. If we were to look at this in past tense, that there was nothing that was going to change who we were going to be and what we were going to decide. Now, I'm not saying that salvation doesn't change you, but I'm saying we would have always gotten there. Didn't matter where we ended up. But where this gets a basis of how things are fair, in my opinion, because I've thought about this kind of long and hard, that we had, in my opinion, I feel like there's a good chance that for this to happen and to work out the way it does, that with God being fair, what could have happened, and what would make sense to me is that we were all tested before we came here. So, for instance, if you do a scientific study and there's no slant to it, there's no partiality, you'll take a controlled situation and you'll take everything's going to be sterile or clean, or everything's going to have the same type of, each box or each culture or each thing that you're going to test is going to be the same. And the reason for that is to get a definitive answer. So if you're going to test whether a mouse would do something, like say a psychological test, right? You would do the same thing in 150 boxes with 150 of the same genetic species of a mouse with all the same test. And you would perform the same test 1,000 times, whatever. And then if you get the same answer from all 1,000 of these controlled tests, then you kind of have a definitive answer, a predeterminate, right? Well, that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about that we weren't, just kick reincarnation out of your head, okay? Because I know like a lot of people can get this religious spirit or something all of a sudden and jump to conclusions. God wants you, he gave you a brain to think, to have some kind of freedom to think. So Don't get triggered. And being open to understanding or going through a topic of conversation is not something evil, y'all. I've heard that so much. It's not necessarily from you guys. In fact, you guys are pretty well open to, things that I've spoke on. But I'm saying, like, in the past, outside of the channel, man, you get some people, man, that are really triggered by whatever they're just regurgitating stuff. And I hate that. But, so let's say before we all entered Earth, we were in a controlled environment. We all had the same thing. We all had the same, we were all in a room the same size. We all had the same innate spirit, meaning, like, that's where we were the same. Maybe if something was going to happen different, it was going to happen there. I honestly think that it would have to happen there. It would have to happen in a controlled environment. So God, in all his goodness, right, and knowing everything, can't really get tested on Earth because there is no controlled environment. And God is he's fair. And for it to truly be fair, it would kind of have to start from a controlled environment. It doesn't have to end that way, but it has to start that way. Because if you can't start in a controlled environment, it can never be fair. Because at some point, this is the thing, at some point, environmental and the things around you and the situational, psychological, the genetic, the weather, everything, the financial, everything would play into it. You see, everything would be a determinant factor of what you turn into. But I don't believe that's the case, but see, that's what psychology throws on you. They throw on you that we come here and it's not a fair world. And in Christianity, they'll tell you it's not a fair world, but God's fair. That can't be the case, in my opinion. I mean, but let's look at it logically. Logically, that doesn't make any sense. For us to come here and it's not fair because you grew up in, we're bomb-stricken alley, bomb-stricken city where everybody died but you. And I grew up in, Millionaire Square. And then there's some guy that, he grew up in modern suburbia. And grew up in the country. I mean, you can't take all of those things and all the environmental factors if we're just placed here and say that would be fair. You see? That to me doesn't make sense. But what would make sense, and I say that because you kind of, we should be able to understand God in a lot of ways. And a lot of people would say, well, you can't understand certain things in God. And I understand that, but the things of our world and the things that got us here, there's answers to. And God put them here for us to, if we think about it and we use the biblical narrative as our law and our guide, and we have the Holy Ghost, we should have a chance at trying to get a pretty good answer. That's what people write all kind of material about, except the material we get from this world and even from the theological community has been hijacked. So they're not even trying to steer you right. And that's why YouTube is kind of interesting, kind of cool, because you can hop on YouTube and start a channel and you can tell the truth. And outside of that, there's very little of it in this world. And with that, what I'm getting at is God, we came from God. We were put in some sort of controlled environment. All of us and the sibling narcissists and whoever. And we all had, the same things. We all had the same bed, the same chair, the same energy. We all had the same genetics. We all ate the same bread in our controlled environment. We all drank the same water. And the water was the same consistency. And the temperature was the same. And we all had the same socioeconomic status. And we all grew up in the same controlled environment. And it was perfect. It was perfect because it was not here on Earth. And some of us in that controlled environment, our innate spirit rejected God. Some of us, we rode the fence. We were lukewarm. Some of us did right by God very quickly, maybe. Some of us, there was a spectrum. And through that spectrum, let's say there's an algorithm. And the algorithm with God would go forever. Like his math and his algorithm for this, he could break it down. We're talking about cell to cell, everything. And that's where our determinant factor came into play on exactly where we needed to be birthed for it to be fair for us in this world system. What family and the right spot for each, this is how good God is, the right spot in the earth that it is fair for us. But it was when he pointed us and plotted us, we already had answered what was going to happen. Our determinant factor was before we got here. Now, this is my personal opinion, and this is fresh off the block. This has absolutely no influence outside of the nature of God that I know that he gave me. But I'm saying, this is when I pondered these things with a heart that loves God, and I know the biblical narrative, and I just don't see any other way. Why? Then you would ask, why are we here then if we're just walking out? If we were in a controlled environment, then why would we even have to go through all this? And that's because for it to be fair, you would have to be tested in a literal controlled environment that was absolute, which would only be able to take place in the labs of heaven to some degree, right? And then you'd have to be plotted down wherever you were positioned that was fair for you on this earth based on the trillions of algorithms. And then from there, it's not fair until you actually have went through all of the motions of it. Because you would have the opportunity to say it's not fair because you have no proof. You have no proof. Our proof was literally done in the controlled environment in heaven or wherever, in the controlled environment where God, first brought us to be. We were tested there first, then we were placed here on earth in the exact place. Maybe for you needed to be born in the UK in a middle-class family where it rains half the year and it's cold half the year. And for me, it was fair for me to be born in America and to the family I did and the environment I was in. And for somebody else, it was somewhere else. And for everybody else, it's other places. But because of how we operate in our controlled environment, how we were in our genuine self is what determined, based on all the algorithms, what God knew was absolutely fair to us here on this earth, where we were positioned and placed as a baby. And no matter whatever we dealt with, whatever, was going to come, that's already controlled as well. That's controlled meaning like God controls all. But where we had to choose from our innateness couldn't have been here, wouldn't have been fair. In my opinion, and I say this humbly, for what I would think would be fair in a situation of how my understanding is of who God is. And this right here, when people say that the earth is our courts, it's our courts because this is our proof. And that's why we're here. We're walking out our judgment into fruition. But we're already a predeterminate to God of what we're going to do. But we had to be tested in a controlled environment that was perfect. And that would have to be off earth, somewhere off earth, in a place like heaven, where you can have perfection testing. I mean, without any sort of corruption at all. And this here is our proof that that's what he said we were going to do, that we did it. And now we have to get judged for what he said we were going to do, and we did. But I'm not taking away salvation, because it also proved that we knew that we needed Jesus and that we couldn't do without him. We knew that. And we eventually cried out to him and got that free gift from God, because God is the one that freely gives it. That's why your heart has to be right. You have to be contrite. You have to be fertile for him. And so my point is, in the controlled environment, the narcissists, man, they were sticking and stabbing people and robbing people in the controlled environment as a little baby, and they're already acting like a narcissist. You can't say it wasn't fair if we all went through a controlled environment in a place so perfect as it's not a laboratory. I'm not saying like put the stem cell in there. I'm saying like somehow, you know what I'm saying? We were in a controlled environment and they were screwing up already, because we all had, say, the same tools, and we used ours for good, and they didn't. They used theirs for breaking and entering, for robbing folks, deceiving them. You could even look at it like almost like the Garden of Eden. It had the enemy in there, And it kind of gives you an idea or a thought like that, because there would have to be, in a controlled environment, a place where the enemy could get at you. Or else we would all seem like we would all have to act perfect. Destiny is true, y'all. When Satan fell with the third of the hosts, that was their choice to choose whether they wanted to be with God or not. And 2/3 said they were staying, that they were with their rightful king, and they knew that. But the third that left, they thought differently. And God gave us all that opportunity. But that's a situation where they were kind of in a controlled environment, a perfect environment. And on earth, it's not like that. And again, it gets to your true innateness. They played out their true innateness in heaven for its fruition. But that was fair from the jump, because it was perfect. And they were created perfect. And that's what I'm saying. In our innateness, we were created perfect as well. In this controlled environment. That's just my opinion. You got to look at it from a deep, deep, deep point of view. So I don't expect not many people to get this, or to not pawn it off as crazy. but there's going to be a few out there that are going to understand what I'm saying. But God doesn't want you to have to be anywhere if you don't want to be there. And that's why God doesn't control it all, for the most part. He gets to a point to where he's had enough. But a lot of times he'll let you walk yourself down into that trench, into that gully. And he's very patient. That's why, like, I bet while these fallen angels were devising their evil in heaven, it didn't just happen over 1 second or moment in time and then God threw them out. This happened over years probably, and he just allowed it to happen. He allowed them to do this to themselves. He probably didn't even kick them out of heaven. They probably just started to fall. Something like that crazy happened. I mean, I know there was a war in heaven, but I'm saying that he knows all things. He knew what was going to, but the enemy doesn't work that way. The enemy doesn't work that way because he's not all powerful. That's why the enemy, well, I mean, that's one reason. He's got all evil in him. God wants you blessed. He wants you free. He wants you to have autonomy and creativity and common sense. And he wants you to love him. But he ain't going to make you. He ain't going to make you love him. The enemy wants you dirt, broke, and poor, fighting each other, locked in chains. And he wants you decrepit. He wants cameras on you. He wants you locked down and emaciated. That's control, y'all. That's the narcissist. God's going to let you fall. Satan's going to come get you with guns and chains and jail cells and cameras. Satan's going to lie to both sides of an army and have them fighting each other for no reason. He divides to conquer. God don't need to do that. Nor is that him. I was going to talk about another topic today, but I'm going to leave it there because I got so deep with it. But this is why it's fair for the narcissist, in my opinion. And this is why it's fair for us and fair for everybody, no matter what happens to them here on this earth. Because we were all in some sort of controlled environment. Maybe not for a long time, maybe just for long enough. I don't know, a few days, a few hours, whatever it took for the determinant. And the determinant was not for God to know. It was again proof that we came from fairness, complete fairness from God. That's why you would have the controlled environment, and that's why you would have your life pinpointed here on earth wherever you were plotted down after you left that controlled environment based on how you operated in that controlled environment is what was fair to you. It was fair to you there, and it was fair to you where you ended up here. And then after you die, you go to the courts of heaven and you get judged by, you can't come to God and say it wasn't fair because he put you in a controlled environment, all of us the same way, in a place like heaven where it was absolutely perfect and there's no way you could defy that. There's no rebuttal for that. And then when you're planted here on earth, it was based on how you acted and operated in that controlled environment, in that heavenly place, to determine where you were put here based on fairness, exactly where you needed to be, to the exact family, down to the T, how many hairs you had on your head, or else it wouldn't have been fair. And that's why he talks about stuff like that. He knows how many hairs are on your head, and if one's missing, he knows that too. Why? Because he is so fair with you that it comes down to every little inkling, even the hairs on your head. This is deep. I told you ain't going to get the milk from this channel. And you've never heard stuff on this channel that you're going to hear in no church because these churches are lying to you. And from all the hibernating I did since I've gotten saved and all the studies I've done, God's allowed me to see certain things. And it's authentic, truly. And that's why sometimes I'm going to come to you with things that are stuff you've never heard in your life before. So anyway, if you can give me a like, subscription, thumbs up. Till next time, peace, we out.